The cardboard hospital coffee cup trembled in Naomi Preston's hands as she stared at the latest medical bill. The number at the bottom, 347,892.14, seemed to pulse with malicious intent. 3 surgeries in 8 months for her 5-year-old daughter Olivia, and the insurance had maxed out. The experimental treatment that might save her little girl's life wasn't covered at all. "Miss Preston?" A nurse with kind eyes appeared in the doorway. "Olivia's awake and asking for you." Naomi quickly wiped away her tears and followed the nurse down the sterile hallway. Inside the pediatric room, Olivia's small form was nearly swallowed by the hospital bed, her dark curls splayed against the white pillow. Despite the tubes and monitors, her daughter's smile lit up when she saw Naomi. "Mommy, did you bring Mr. Whiskers?" Olivia's voice was thin but determined. Naomi produced the well-loved stuffed cat from her bag. "Of course! He was worried about you." As Olivia drifted back to sleep, Naomi stepped into the hallway to take a call from yet another collection agency. The conversation was brief and humiliating. When she hung up, she slid down the wall, buried her face in her hands, and did something she rarely allowed herself. She broke down completely. "Rough day?" The deep voice startled her. Naomi looked up to find a man watching her with unexpected compassion in his steel-gray eyes. His tailored suit probably cost more than her monthly rent, and something about his stance suggested a man accustomed to command. She hastily wiped her tears. "Sorry, I didn't mean to be in your way." "You're not." He settled beside her against the wall, seemingly unconcerned about his expensive suit touching the hospital floor. "I'm Dominic. Dominic Thorne," the name registered. Dimly in her exhausted mind, Thorne Technologies, the billionaire CEO whose face occasionally graced business magazines. What was someone like him doing in a public hospital hallway? "Naomi Preston," she replied automatically. "Your daughter?" he asked, nodding toward Olivia's room. "Heart condition. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome." The words felt mechanical after repeating them to so many doctors. "She needs an experimental procedure, but—" She gestured helplessly at the crumpled bill in her hand. Dominic's eyes flickered to the paper, then back to her face with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, she found herself continuing. "I've tried everything, second job, loans, even a crowdfunding campaign. But it's not enough, not nearly enough. I might have a proposition for you, Naomi Preston." His voice lowered, and something in his tone made her pulse quicken. What kind of proposition could a billionaire possibly have for me? The mutually beneficial kind. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "I need a wife. Temporarily." Naomi stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me? My ex-fiancé's father is orchestrating a hostile takeover of my company. The prenuptial agreement stipulated that if I married someone else within the year, his family's shares revert to me." His explanation was businesslike, detached. "I need someone with no connections to my industry, someone trustworthy. And you think that's me? A stranger you just met in a hospital hallway? I'm an excellent judge of character." He handed her a business card. 6 months of marriage. In exchange, I'll cover all medical expenses for your daughter, past, present, and future, plus a settlement that ensures you'll never worry about money again. Naomi's fingers closed around the card, her mind reeling. This is insane. Perhaps. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. But desperation makes us consider options we'd normally dismiss, doesn't it? Before she could respond, his phone rang. With a nod, he stepped away to take the call, leaving Naomi staring at the embossed card in her hand. Through the door, she could see Olivia's small chest rising and falling, the heart monitor beeping steadily. 6 months of pretending to love a stranger versus a lifetime without her daughter. When framed, that way it wasn't really a choice at all. When Dominic returned, Naomi met his gaze steadily. "If we do this, I have conditions," she said. I expected nothing less. His expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Respect, perhaps. Olivia comes first. Always. And when this ends, we walk away cleanly. No complications. Dominic extended his hand. Do we have a deal, Miss Preston? As their hands clasped, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal with the devil. A devastatingly handsome devil who might be her daughter's only hope. The camera flashes were blinding as Naomi stepped out of the limousine, her hand firmly clasped in Dominic's. The midnight blue gown he'd had delivered to the penthouse hugged her curves in ways that made her self-conscious, but Dominic's appreciative glance had momentarily quieted her doubts. Just breathe, he whispered against her ear, his warm breath sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. Remember, you're a thorn now. Act like you own the room. 2 weeks into their arrangement, and Naomi was still adjusting to the dizzying changes. One moment she'd been a struggling single mother, the next she was thrust into a whirlwind courthouse wedding and moved into Dominic's penthouse with Olivia, who was now receiving treatment from world-renowned specialists. Mr. Thorne, is it true? You married a waitress? A reporter shouted. Dominic's arm tightened protectively around her waist. I married an extraordinary woman who reminds me daily what really matters in life, he answered smoothly. The charity gala glittered with Manhattan's elite. Naomi recognized faces from magazines and television, all curious about Dominic Thorne's mysterious new bride. Dominic, darling. A statuesque blonde approached, her smile sharp as a scalpel. Aren't you going to introduce me to your hasty acquisition? Victoria. Dominic's tone was ice cold. Meet my wife, Naomi. Naomi, this is Victoria Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Pharmaceuticals. Victoria's gaze swept over Naomi with calculated assessment. How refreshing. Tell me, where did Dominic find you? A charity case, perhaps? Before Naomi could respond, a gentle tug on her dress captured her attention. Olivia stood there in her little purple dress, having escaped her babysitter. Mommy, Mr. Dominic promised to dance with me, she announced, oblivious to the tension. Naomi watched in amazement as Dominic's entire demeanor transformed. He crouched down to Olivia's level, his normally stern face softening. I did promise. Didn't I, princess? He lifted the giggling child into his arms. Ladies, if you'll excuse us, I have a dance date. As Dominic twirled Olivia carefully on the dance floor, Victoria leaned closer to Naomi. Enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts. Men like Dominic don't change their nature, no matter how convincing the act. Later that night, after tucking Olivia into bed in her new room filled with toys and medical equipment, Naomi found Dominic on the penthouse terrace, staring out at the city lights. You were good with her tonight, Naomi said, joining him by the railing. You didn't have to dance with her. Perhaps I wanted to. His profile was sharp against the night sky. Children have a refreshing honesty. Olivia doesn't care about my net worth or my company's stock price. Why did Victoria look at you like she wanted to devour you alive? Dominic's laugh was hollow. Because she does. Victoria and I were engaged 3 years ago, before I discovered she was feeding information to her father about Thorne Technologies. The Blackwoods have been trying to acquire my company ever since. She's the ex-fiancée you mentioned? No. His knuckles whitened against the railing. That would be her sister, Rebecca. The silence stretched between them until Naomi spoke. Again. Thank you for what you're doing for Olivia. It's part of our arrangement. Still, you didn't have to find Dr. Werner or arrange for the experimental treatment so quickly. Something vulnerable flickered across his face before disappearing behind his usual mask. I know what it's like to lose someone you love to a failing medical system. My brother died waiting for a treatment that came too late. Before Naomi could process this revelation, her phone buzzed. The name on the screen made her blood run cold. Julian. Problem? Dominic asked, noting her expression. My brother. Naomi silenced the phone. We haven't spoken in 2 years, not since he disappeared with my savings, money I'd been setting aside for Olivia's treatment. Dominic's eyes narrowed. And suddenly, he's calling now that you're in the news as my wife? Apparently. Dominic took the phone gently from her hand. Family can be complicated. But remember, Naomi, as long as you're my wife, you and Olivia are protected. Nothing and no one will hurt either of you. As his fingers brushed hers, Naomi felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, not whatever this warm, fluttering feeling was. I should check on Olivia, she murmured, stepping away. Dominic watched her go, his expression unreadable. Neither noticed the sleek black car parked across the street or the man with Naomi's eyes taking photographs of the penthouse windows. Part 3. Dangerous Revelations. The files spilled across Naomi's lap as the taxi swerved through Manhattan traffic. Her hands trembled as she reread the document header. Blackwood Thorne Medical Research Initiative. 3 months into her marriage of convenience, and the lines were blurring dangerously. Dominic had become a fixture in Olivia's life, helping. With her physical therapy, reading bedtime stories, even taking late-night shifts when her medication caused nightmares. Naomi found herself watching him, cataloging the differences between his public persona and the man who gently tucked a stuffed animal beside her sleeping daughter. Then Julian had appeared at her favorite coffee shop, as if their estrangement had never happened. I'm worried about you, Nomi, he'd said, using her childhood nickname. Have you done your research on your new husband? When she'd defended Dominic, Julian had slid a thumb drive across the table. Thorne Technologies owns 40% of Meridian Medical Research, the company that denied Olivia's treatment before you miraculously married the billionaire. The documents confirmed it all. Dominic's company was a major stakeholder in the very corporation that had deemed Olivia's treatment experimentally unviable 6 months earlier. The taxi stopped at the Thorne Technologies building. Naomi paid the driver and stepped out, clutching the files like weapons. The security guards nodded respectfully. Mrs. Thorne had full access. She found Dominic in his office, deep in conversation with his legal counsel, Elliot Ramsey. We need to discuss something, she said from the doorway. Now. Dominic must have read something in her expression, because he immediately dismissed Elliot. As the door closed, Naomi slapped the files onto his desk. Did you know? She demanded. When? You approached me in that hospital. Did you know your company was responsible for denying my daughter's treatment? The color drained from Dominic's face as he scanned the documents. Where did you get these? Does it matter? Answer the question, Dominic. He stood slowly, his movements careful as if approaching a wounded animal. I knew Meridian had denied some experimental treatments. I didn't know Olivia was one of the cases. But you found out, didn't you? Before the wedding? The muscle in his jaw twitched. Yes. The confirmation hit her like a physical blow. So what was this? Guilt? Some twisted form of corporate damage control? It wasn't like that. For the first time. She heard desperation in his voice. After I learned about the connection, I wanted to help even more. Meridian's policies were implemented by the board, against my recommendations. Convenient. Naomi turned to leave, but Dominic caught her wrist. Naomi, listen to me. Yesterday I called a board meeting. I've initiated a complete overhaul of Meridian's approval processes. What happened to Olivia won't happen to another child. His grip was gentle, his eyes pleading for understanding. Naomi pulled away, confused by the warring emotions inside her. Before she could respond, Dominic's phone rang. His expression darkened as he answered. When? He listened intently. Keep him there. I'm coming down. What is it? Naomi asked, her anger momentarily forgotten. Your brother is downstairs demanding to see you. He's with Victoria Blackwood. Downstairs, Julian stood in the lobby beside Victoria, both looking impossibly polished and pleased with themselves. There she is, Julian said when he spotted Naomi. My sister, the billionaire's bride. What do you want, Julian? Naomi kept her voice steady. Victoria stepped forward. We thought you should know who you're really married to. Dominic Thorne isn't the savior he pretends to be. And you care about my well-being now? Naomi laughed bitterly. The woman who called me a charity case? I care about justice, Victoria replied. Ask your husband about Project Lazarus. Ask him what really happened to the test subjects. Dominic's hand found the small of Naomi's back. My wife isn't interested in your corporate espionage tactics, Victoria. Your wife, Julian interjected, deserves to know that her daughter's miracle treatment comes with strings attached. Olivia isn't just a patient. She's a test subject. Naomi felt the floor shift beneath her. What is he talking about, Dominic? Before he could answer, security surrounded them. Dominic leaned close to her ear. Not here. I'll explain everything at home, I promise. As they left, Victoria called after them. The Dominic Thorne I knew would sacrifice anyone for his company. Ask yourself if he's really changed or if you and your daughter are just another business transaction. She's stabilizing, but we need to monitor her closely. Dr. Werner's voice was grave as he looked at Olivia's small form, now connected to even more machines than before. The treatment is working, but her body is fighting it. Naomi nodded mechanically, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. The emergency had come in the middle of the night, Olivia's temperature spiking dangerously high, her little body convulsing. Now, in the private hospital room Dominic had arranged, the crisis had passed, but the fear remained. I'll leave you, alone, the doctor said, slipping out quietly. Dominic stepped forward from where he'd been standing vigil by the door for the past 6 hours. His usual immaculate appearance was gone, tie loosened, stubble darkening his jaw, eyes haunted. The doctors say she's going to pull through, he offered softly. This time. Naomi's voice was hollow. But what about the next reaction? Or the one after that? What exactly is this treatment, Dominic? Is Julian right? Is my daughter just another experiment? He flinched as if she'd struck him. The treatment is experimental, yes, but it's also her best chance. That's not what I asked. Dominic sank into the chair beside Olivia's bed. Project Lazarus was originally developed for military applications, cellular regeneration for injured soldiers. When my brother was diagnosed with heart failure, I redirected the research toward civilian applications. Using children as test subjects? The accusation hung between them. No. His response was fierce. The adult trials were successful. Olivia is among the first pediatric patients, but every safety protocol has been followed. I would never risk her life. Naomi wanted to believe him. Over the past months, she'd seen how he looked at Olivia with the same fierce protectiveness she felt. But Victoria's words kept replaying in her mind. Just another business transaction. I need time to think, she said finally. Alone. Something like panic flashed across Dominic's face. Naomi, please, Dominic, just go. After he left, Naomi collapsed beside Olivia's bed, clutching her daughter's small hand. 4 months into their 6-month arrangement, and nothing was as simple as it had seemed. Somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred between pretense and reality. She'd begun to imagine a future where their fake marriage might become something real. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Julian stood in the doorway, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. How did you find us? She asked wearily. I have my sources. He approached cautiously. How is she? Stable. No thanks to you and your dramatic revelations. Julian had the grace to look ashamed. I'm sorry about that, but you needed to know the truth about Thorne. Why are you working with Victoria Blackwood? He shrugged. She approached me after your wedding made the news. Said she wanted to protect you from a man who'd destroy anyone for profit. And what does she get out of your help? Information. Leverage. He hesitated. Look, she's offered me a deal. If I help her acquire certain documents from Thorne's private server, she'll make sure Olivia gets continued care, regardless of what happens with your marriage. Naomi stared at him incredulously. You want me to spy on my husband? I want you to protect your daughter. Julian pulled out a small device. All you have to do is plug this into his home office computer. It'll copy files related to Project Lazarus, nothing more. Get out, Naomi whispered. Nomi, now, Julian, before I call security. After he left, Naomi sat in the quiet hospital room, turning the small device over in her hands. The weight of her decision pressed down on her like a physical force. Later that evening, when Dominic returned with fresh clothes and Olivia's favorite stuffed animal, Naomi had made her choice. She placed the device back in her pocket, watching him tenderly arrange Mr. Whiskers beside their sleeping daughter. Some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. Part 5. Redemption and Real Love. The boardroom of Thorne Technologies hummed with tension. Executives shifted uncomfortably as Dominic stood at the head of the table, his expression grave. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1 hour, I'll be making a public announcement that will affect the future of this company. His voice was steady despite the gravity of his words. Effective immediately, all research from Project Lazarus will be placed in the public domain. Meridian Medical's treatment approval process will be completely restructured, with oversight from an independent ethics committee. Elliot Ramsey shot to his feet. Dominic, you can't be serious. The shareholders have been profiting from a system that puts costs above care. Dominic's tone left no room for argument. I've already discussed this with our major investors. Most agree it's the right thing to do. And the Blackwood takeover attempt? Another executive asked. Will likely accelerate, which is why I've called this meeting. Dominic glanced at his watch. The next few days will determine whether Thorne Technologies remains independent or falls to Victoria Blackwood's hostile takeover. I need to know who stands with me. As the executives filed out, promises of loyalty trailing behind them, Dominic remained at the table, staring at the family photo he'd placed before him. Himself, Naomi, and Olivia at the park 3 weeks ago. Their smiles were genuine, their happiness unscripted. It was everything he'd never known he wanted, and everything he stood to lose. Miles away in the penthouse, Naomi packed the last of Olivia's things. The little girl watched from her wheelchair, confusion written across her face. Why can't Mr. Dominic come with us? She asked for the 3rd time. It's complicated, sweetheart. Naomi zipped the suitcase closed. Sometimes grown-ups need space to figure things out. The truth was more complex than she could explain to a 5-year-old. After discovering Julian's device in her pocket, Dominic's security team had conducted a sweep of the penthouse. Julian had been arrested attempting to access Dominic's private server, and Victoria's involvement had been exposed. But the damage was done. The trust between them, fragile to begin with, had shattered. Naomi's phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking! Thorne Technologies CEO to make major announcement on Project Lazarus. She turned on the television just as Dominic stepped up to a podium crowded with microphones. 5 years ago, my brother died waiting for a treatment that pharmaceutical companies deemed financially unviable, he began. I promised myself no family would face that devastation again. Today, I'm announcing that all patents related to Project Lazarus will be released to the public domain, allowing any medical facility worldwide to implement these life-saving protocols. The reporters erupted with questions. Dominic raised a hand for silence. Additionally, I'm establishing the Olivia Foundation, named after a remarkable little girl who taught me that some things are worth more than profit margins. This foundation will ensure that no child is denied treatment based on financial considerations. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth, tears blurring her vision. On screen, a reporter shouted above the din, "Mr. Thorne, sources say this decision will likely trigger the Blackwood takeover of your company. Are you prepared to lose everything you've built?" Dominic's smile was sad but determined. "Some losses teach us what we truly value. I built Thorne Technologies to change the world. If I have to lose it to fulfill that mission, so be it." As he stepped away from the podium, Naomi made her decision. She grabbed her phone and dialed. "Elliot, it's Naomi Thorne. I need your help with something." 3 hours later, Dominic returned to the penthouse to find it empty. Or so he thought until he stepped onto the terrace. Naomi stood there, illuminated by the city lights, more beautiful than he had any right to hope for. "I thought you'd be gone," he said quietly. "I was." She turned to face him. "And then I saw your press conference." "Ah." He moved to stand beside her at the railing. "My corporate suicide note, according to Elliot. Your redemption, according to me." She reached for his hand. "I spoke with Victoria." Dominic tensed. "What did she want?" "To gloat. To offer me a position on her new board after she takes control of Thorne Technologies." Naomi's smile was enigmatic. "I declined. I also showed her the evidence I've been gathering about her company's illegal human trials in developing countries." "What? Evidence?" "The files Julian was actually trying to steal weren't yours. They were Victoria's. I've spent the last month working with Elliot to build a case against Blackwood Pharmaceuticals. The Justice Department is very interested." Dominic stared at her in amazement. "You've been investigating Victoria?" "I needed to know who was telling the truth." Her voice softened. "The night Olivia had her reaction, I found research notes you'd left open on your desk. Your brother's case file, your desperate attempts to save him, the ethical protocols you established for Project Lazarus. I knew then that you weren't the man Victoria claimed. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed proof to stop her. And because I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of this." She gestured between them. "Of feeling something real for the man I married for. Money. Of loving someone who might only see me as part of an arrangement." Dominic's breath caught. "Say that again." "Which part?" "The part about loving someone."